Okay, so today something a little different than the usual software stuff. Well, technically this is still software. I'll try and arrange for another talk where I can show the parallel between the mind and and any modern PC. Right, it has a same set of processor, same set of input output devices, memory, and a lot of the things. Some of it will make sense in this talk, but we'll keep that the equivalence between the mind and the processor for another talk. But in essence, this is just a software computer we're dealing with here. So what is it that we can do with it, and what are its limitations? How does it work? So this is just a brief um, you know walk through that. So agenda is going to be why get into anything called mindfulness practice. What problem does it solve, and what exactly it is. There'll be pointers to modern neuroscience research that actually says that some of it is substantiated with external verification, external measurements. What are those? And then finally, how do you do it? So there's going to be an interesting 5-minute demo. I guess that'll be um, halfway through the talk. So um, yeah, so feel free to interrupt me as we're going along. Um, Otherwise, we'll get started. So the disclaimer, this talk is essentially, it's barely scratching the surface. The theory and practice is captured in a vast manual that is up to 2,500 years old. In a language that is dead. It's deader than Latin. So nobody speaks this language. It's called Pali. Um, some of the sections could be sessions of their own. So if there's interest, then we can arrange for that. Um, but hopefully I've kept it brief and yet not oversimplified it. All right, so I've not removed any critical parts, and I've not made it look like some hocus pocus. There's a fair bit of science in this. All right, so let's start with the definition, right? So what is mindfulness, right? So the definition, according to the place that it was originally defined, right? This manual is about 2,500 years old, maybe a bit more. So it's essentially remembering and ability to call to mind things even things that were said and done long ago. And this is, you can click on this and it's actually stated as such. It's pretty much aligns with the English usage. Be mindful of your surroundings when driving. So it's the same sense, right? And which basically means that it's a function of memory. That's about it. Right. So there's no special magic in here, right? You're just training your memory, and we'll come to some of the mechanics. There are various types of mindfulness. Breath is the most common. Breath is the nearest, but breath is also special, right? It lets you influence your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. So to excite you or to calm you down, right? You can essentially manipulate your moods that way. There are postures of the body. You can do it while walking, sitting, eating, everything, right? Um, then there are mindfulness of the feelings. There are some of the good, pleasant, unpleasant, neither pleasant, neither unpleasant. Mindfulness of the mind itself. Typically, this is a bit more advanced. So we use the breath as a mirror to the mind. So if anything goes on in the mind, right, there's a first impact is on the breath, right? So then you can sort of trace back. So use the breath as a marker for the activities in the mind, right? But this one is a bit. You'll need some practice in the thing to actually go straight into the observing the mind. And then finally, mindfulness of impending death. So if you guys have seen Steve Jobs' 2005 Stanford commencement speech, has anybody seen that?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's essentially mindfulness of death, right? So it's impending death, and it's not to make you morbid, and it's not to make you depressed, and that it just says that, hey, the backlog has a cut line, so you might as well prioritize the critical stuff above the cut line. So that's about it, right? So let's get into the why, right? Now here's one of the groundbreaking things that was done 2500 years back, and in my opinion this beats even general theory of relativity. Just my opinion, right? This is the singular most spectacular thing that a human has devised. So let's say that so how do you model thought worlds, right? So when you get stuck in your thoughts, and when you in your mind, right? So how do you, like, what is the model? Is there a way to break it down? Is there a method to the madness, right? So as you guys might have seen, right? There's the external physical world, your friends, family, co-workers, pets, object, trees, office, name it, everything is in here. So that's the external physical world, subject to laws of gravity, laws of quantum mechanics, and blah 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 blah, thermodynamics, blah 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 blah. On the other side, there is the mind, right? And then there are certain events in the mind. So you have a thought, you have a perception, you know you go to sleep where the mind shuts down and things like that. Now, so what is the interaction between the two, right? So there is this is a nice formalism of that, and this is captured in a very detailed theory called theory of dependent co-arising. That's I'm just covering a part of that. I think the critical part of that, actually all of it is critical, but we won't have time. So that probably another 2-3 talks just for that. So let's say that we have some desire, right? And it could be something like, hey, I want an ice cream now, or it could be I desire a promotion, or it could be something like I crave that hot chocolate fudge, or it could be some need, right? I have need for sugar, right? So that's a need for sugar, need for sex. That those are like genetic inbuilt thing, right? As human species. So everything starts with a desire, right? So suddenly a desire pops into your mind. So then what happens, right? So this thing sustains certain mental processes. If there are additional questions, I can get into that. But the critical thing here is the perception, which is essentially how you label things, right? So right now, the situation you are labeling is that, hey, I'm attending a talk. But you could also label it as, hey, some idiot is talking, right? So those are equally valid labels for the current scenario, right? And then there are a bunch of other things, right? So essentially, let's say that you want to, let's say right now that one of you or some of you are craving for the pizza, right? So let's say a pizza, you just thought of a pizza and you want it now. So you typically will be thinking, you know what, last time had that pizza and that pizza wasn't so good. Maybe I should have cheese crust. I need some extra pounds. Who doesn't, right? All thick cheese crust, and maybe I need some pepperoni in that. So that is exactly what's going on here. So the mental activity around. So you start off with a thought, like a blip in the mind, then you put stories around it, right? So this pizza is good, that pizza is not good. You know what? Last time I sat with Christos and he ate half my pizza. That kind of stories comes up. Um, so okay, so now we have this mental activity. So it's all like fairly haphazard, but then something interesting happens right after this, right? So remember that the physical world has like pretty much infinite amount of information. Now, for you to be able to make any meaningful sense out of it, for you to be able to act out of it, you need some sort of an abstraction. There's so much of data overload here. So what ends up happening is that this set of mental proliferation determines what you want to abstract. For example, if it's a pizza, then you really don't care about the credit card due date that is 1 year from now, right? So that's totally out of your mind. Right, so that's what I mean by abstraction. Even though the credit card is there right in your back pocket, you've probably not considered it. So this one determines what to abstract, this mental proliferation based on this desire, and we have something called a becoming, right? So this mental activity coalesces, so this starts taking form here, and it's called a becoming. Becoming, essentially you form an identity in your mind, uh, in essence to satisfy the desire. So right now I have a craving for the pizza. Okay, so how do I go about it? Now, a few things are critical aspects of that becoming, right? So this is, if becoming is a set, these are the elements of the set following. So the entity is relevant to the desire. For example, the pizza guy's phone number, that's relevant to the desire. The pizza itself, the shape of the pizza, who you want to eat with, who you want to eat with, that's relevant. Again, the credit card in the pocket, back of your pocket is not relevant. So you would have completely forgotten about it. So entities that are relevant to the desire, you pulled into the mental thought world. Entities that are irrelevant, you just leave them out. Right, you just completely. So this is also similar to the Gestalt theory of psychology, even if you guys have read it, which is essentially change blindness, right? So you would have completely sort of wiped it out of your memory for now, even though it's very much there in the environment. Now, entities relevant to the desire forms in two classes. Entities aiding the desire. So if another of your friends wants to eat the pizza, then you know that two of you can essentially start planning it, right? Or the pizza guy is just about to come in and you want to go, so he's aiding the desire. He wants to get you the pizza. Then there are things that are getting in the way of the desire, right? So for example, this very talk could be getting in the way of your desire. Like, I have to listen to this idiot for another, 45 minutes. Maybe I should get up. So essentially, this talk is blocking your satisfying your your intention or your want. And around that, right, there are three senses of you that is built in. One is the consumer, the guy who's going to, or the entity that is going to consume the pizza, right? The target of the desire, the entity that is going to act to meet the desire. So in which case it is you. You have to get up, you have to call up, you have to plan for yourself. And finally, the entity that is coordinating between the two of them, right? So this, if you observe carefully, right, you can actually see three guys. Like there'll be one guy passing a comment saying that, hey, you know what, it's too late. The talk is overflowing by 15 minutes. I can't wait. So then you will command the other guy. So hey, let's move, because this guy will be getting restless. So in essence, right, a typical thought world, a typical mental phenomena can be broken down as like this, right? Now the cool thing here is once this is formed, right, this influences further. So say for this moment, I suddenly branch off into a topic that is of supreme interest to you. You would have forgotten about the pizza, right? So this is how the thought world itself, or you thought of the desire and you said, there's this new pizza offer is there, then you would have said, okay, I can't take it anymore, I'm going to leave the talk, right? So then it influences your mental planning, mental obsession, proliferation, right? Now notice that there is a feedback loop here. So this is the feedback loop that is responsible for the overload, circuit overload, which is what results in panic attacks, rage, and some of these intense emotions, right? So you just form a mental activity and then you pick out the thing that is bothering you, you pull it in, and then you go a few loops around that, and suddenly you are like in a separate crazy state, right? So this is one outcome of this. The another outcome of this is, right, often this is not static. So the classic example is, I had a baby sister, like I still have a baby sister, but she's 40 years old, so it's not really baby. But when she was in school, um, if a couple of guys in her class or a couple of girls in her class used to bully her, and I was 4 years ahead of her. So so hey, my sister, you can't bully my sister, right? So I would go out and show who's the boss, right? So great, that's my sister at that point of time, right? So my sister becomes an entity aiding in my desire. The very day, go home, and we had two ice creams, one each for us, and she just ate up both the ice creams. So suddenly she switches sides and she becomes entity blocking my desire. So then, hey, it's not my sister anymore. It's somebody from the enemy camp, right? So then you get into all fights. So you can see it's a very weirdly. I mean, this is how it is, but this is how weird it is. Like this is how nonsensical it is, right? So same person can be switching sides here, right? So there are a lot of conflicting desires, right? I'll come to that. So this is essentially a way to think about now. How does it help, right? I'll get onto that, right? So what are the possible wants, desires, and cravings? Here's a list, here's a list, and we could have like 15 other slides, all listing it and still not be done. Right. So this is typical, right? Some of it is skillful. Like for example, you want to desire to volunteer at a non-profit, right? That is something that is selfless thing to do. That certainly brings you a lot of satisfaction. And there are certain unskillful things, right? Like you want to gobble down five, or you want to watch Avengers Endgame 12 times in a row, right? So that's a real thing, by the way. Somebody I know has done that, um, right? So those are unskillful, right? Often skillful and unskillful are working at a cross purpose. So can you guys spot something that is at cross purpose here? But those both are desires. So desire for good health and a craving for hot chocolate, peanut butter, fudge, right? They are at odds. Similarly, there are a bunch of other pairs which are at odds, right? So this is why, if you think your mind is in a mess, this explains it, because you're just getting pulled from too many directions. Let's look at the other one. I want alone time and I also desire company, right? They're directly opposite. Uh, Now, what's the nature of thought worlds, right? So there are an uncountable number of wants, desires, cravings, some short term, some long term, some picked up from birth, right? Proclivity for sugar, drive for sex. These are just hardwired, right? Some picked up along the way, earned lots of money. A baby doesn't even know what a money is. You're probably till you're 15 years old, you didn't even know what money is. And all of a sudden, when you're 22, you want to be a millionaire, right? So what happened in that 7 years? 7 years of, something happened there. Every desire creates a thought world. So to service a desire, you necessarily have to make sense of the external world, because there are things in the external world like you have to classify, right? Some things get in the way, some things don't. So you have to kind of build a mental model of that. And which means that there are uncountable number of thought worlds, many interacting and running in parallel, right? And many conflicting, like that sister example I gave. right? So suddenly my sister is the thing to protect, and the sister is the thing to just get out of my way, right? When she's coming and eating my ice cream, it's pretty random, right? The thought world is inherently unstable and unreliable, right? These are approximations. You know, you can clearly see that it's filtered by the current mental activity, right? So if you didn't have a desire for, say, pizza, and you wanted to, if your credit card was running out in 2 days, then you'd probably credit card with the thing in your head and not the pizza, right? So it's as random as that, right? And entities in the abstraction change unpredictably. So you wanted a pizza, but the pizza shop is closed today, right? Great, you just planned for it, and suddenly find out that hey, it's a Saturday and those guys not open anymore anyway. Damn, right? Desires themselves keep changing, right? So 10 years back, something that you really wanted, you don't want it anymore. Think about it. There are lots of things like that, right? So in third standard, in the third grade, if you wanted to become first in school, right? Now what happened to that, right? It's nowhere to be found. And even if you attend it, right? So you have money, you want even more now, right? So thought worlds are just models of the physical world, and model is required because to make sense of the infinite information, you need to make a model out of it, which necessarily means like they are necessary for you because your brain is a final mental capacity, but they're approximate and they're often incorrect because that depends on the current mental state. And incorrect means, so make up your mind, right? Either your sister is your enemy or your sister is a thing to protect. Like both can't be true. So which one is it? So at least one of them is incorrect here, right? I mean, it's it's proof by contradiction. So right now, theory of becoming, right? So what's the implication here? So if you notice carefully, right, moment a desire drops, the entire mental process drops around it, right? So because that's the necessary condition that sustains mental activity, the mental activity coalesces into a becoming. Kill the desire, all of that goes away, right? So no more mental activity. So that's one of the things to notice. Intentions, decisions, plans, and your actual activities in the physical world are all made in the context of the thought worlds. So if you never thought of getting that pizza, you will probably never get that pizza, right? Maybe somebody will offer it to you, but the point is you will never go out of your way and get it. So it has to come to your mind. You have to build that. And based on those intentions, decisions, plans, you act, right? So there are a bunch of examples, right? Say, you said something in a fit of anger, but 10 minutes later, you know what? Damn, I shouldn't have said that. I'm really sorry. That wasn't me. No, that was very much you, but a different you, right? The world appears now compared to 10 years back, right? This is a classic example because your set of your wants, needs, desires, cravings has changed. Hopefully we have grown up. Then these are the feedback loop, right? These are the extremes of emotions, right? When you get into a thinking attack, right? He said this and I have to say this and then I have to say this, then you get into this loop that you can't sleep, right? This is basically you're going in that becoming loop. So with every loop, the becoming becomes stronger till one fine day you just get tired, like 3 a.m. in the morning, you're tired and just sleep off. Now, here's another example. A person was a good friend earlier, but you guys dislike each other now. So suddenly you guys managed to get into each other's entities, that red entities that thought the desire. Again, friendships, partnerships, wars between nations. Soviet Russia and US fought together against the Nazi Germany, right? But war ended and suddenly they found themselves against each other, right? It's a classic example. Again, you're trying to hard to reach somebody but not getting a response simply because that person doesn't think you belong in their becoming. So that they have filtered you out completely. So hence they're not getting a response. In short, right? So this is you, this is your mind, you guys interact. This is everybody else. Everybody else goes through the mind. They don't directly come to you. This is obvious, but this has some serious implications. So mind is the mediator between the above. If your mind makes skillful choices, there's a win-win. If you benefit, everyone benefits, right? If your mind makes unskillful choices, everybody loses, right? So in short, right, if you train your mind, it's essentially the best gift you can give yourself and give everyone else around, right? I mean that's like it's tautologically obvious, but it's something that I guess it's not obvious for at least me, um, right? Right. So what can be done, right? So bad news is it's not an easy problem. So when somebody is in a fit of rage, right, just ask them to calm down, right? Then see what happens. The main reason is right in that state, yeah, the mental activity might have stopped because it's very fleeting, very quick. The mind is very quick, but your hormones all get dredged up. You start breathing in a erratic manner, and you feel like there's a heat in your head, and chest is heavy. So those are due to the hormones, and that has a life cycle, right? That's half-life is unfortunately of the order of minutes and hours. The mind's activity might have stopped, but the body is still reacting, right? And as a result, you recall it and you start all over again. Right. The main thing here is that the desire for the thought world to end itself creates another thought world, right? So now you have, so you can't just want a thought world to end, because guess what? You just created another thought world based on that. So, oh, you know what? I'm such an angry person. I hate myself for it. Wow, you're back, right? So that's the bad news. The good news is you can train and you can handle this situation in a certain way that you can just simply drop it, right? No after effects. And instead you can choose to pursue something that is skillful, right? Um, the other good news is I think most of us, like significant majority of us have a very good idea about what is skillful and what is unskillful, right? So that's also the good news. We have an innate, we all come from good backgrounds. We've got good education, right? We're in a good company. We are surrounded by good people, so we understand what it means to be skillful. This is where the practice comes in, right? So that's the why of the practice. Um, all right, so 5 minutes behind time. Okay, so let's just go through what it is, right? Before we get into, so what's the loop here, right? So there's a very simple loop here. So, your mind is wandering. So, it's jumping. It's like YouTube browsing. You're going from one topic to another topic to another topic, and each is a thought world. So in the thought world, another desire appears. So you decide to drop the thought world and you jump into the new thought world, right? So you just keep, and suddenly you remember that when you're meditating, you remember that you are aware of the wandering mind, right? Suddenly it just pops in. So something reminds you, a higher function of the brain reminds you that, hey, you're supposed to be meditating, but instead your mind is wandering. So you become aware of the wandering mind. You shift your attention back to the object of your meditation, right? And the objects, I'll come to that, what I mean, right? And then after a while, you just slip into this mind wandering again, right? And this is the nature of the mind, right? So that's what that's by default. That's the default mode network. If you guys have heard of it, again you keep wandering, and again you become aware of the mind, and so this is the loop, right? That's all there is to it, right? There's no nothing else, right? This is essentially, no matter what form of practice we're talking about, this is essentially the four part of the practice. What differs is for the mindfulness practice, you are cultivating essentially three skills, right? So one skill is ardency. You are continuously efforting to come back, and this is not a physical effort. This is more of a mental effort, right? You remember, you have a choice from mind wandering to go back to the object of meditation or go back to mind wandering, but you're making a deliberate choice here, and that's the ardency aspect of it, right? You're efforting continuously. You're efforting, right? Skill number two is alertness. So alertness is essentially knowing what the mind is doing while the mind is doing, right? So this is a function of the prefrontal cortex, essentially something that is on the front side of it, right? And this humans are the only known species to have been blessed with this part, right? So alertness is in, like, so there is a watcher that you can train the watcher to watch over what the rest of the mind is doing. So that's alertness. So if the mind shifts, you can quickly detect, and then you can bring it back. And then finally, the mindfulness, right? So mindfulness, as I said, it's just a function of memory. You keep the thing in mind, right? Whatever it is. And the mind wandering is essentially you're just creating and jumping between thought worlds, right? So red is danger. This is where you get into all panic attacks, rage attacks, and all kinds of nonsensical stuff happens out of here. This one is in a lower mind, a mind in an autopilot, and this one is in a higher mind, a mind that is knowing what it is doing while it is doing, and therefore able to choose what it has to do, right? Uh, right? It's less of an animal mind, and this one is more of an animal mind, right? This is enabled by that prefrontal cortex that is significantly developed in the humans. Now, objects of meditation, again, same thing. Meditation of mindfulness of breath, postures of the body, mind, feelings, death. Death can essentially jerk you back into dropping. Again, Stanford commencement speech is a very, very good intro to mindfulness of death. Okay, so this is the meditation loop. Shoot any questions if you have. If not, I will proceed. So since this is memory, right, let's just quickly touch upon the human memory system. And Wikipedia has loads and loads of research linked. This is state of the art research, right? All happened in the last 5 to 10 years. So memory is typically, and this is a rough sketch. This is far more detailed sketches are out there, but there's something called a short-term working memory. The ±7, right? It's a random access. You can store any random items here. So it's sort of the RAM for us. limited, but this is only 7 items at a time, plus minus. So that is why chess grandmasters can remember an entire game, but they, if you show them a randomly placed piece of board, they cannot recall it. But they'll be able to recall any other board that is a part of a real game, right? So that's that Susan Polgar episode on, I think, Discovery Channel that will come. I don't know if you guys seen that. Uh, for something, again, important thing is, since it is plus minus 7, for something new to come in, something existing has to be dropped, right? This is just the limited capacity of your prefrontal cortex. This also explains why you forget during the meditation object, right? So all of a sudden you forget that you are supposed to be the meditation object, but you wandered off because you just pulled in one too many things into your working memory. I don't know if somebody has a question. Okay. Oh yeah, Ian Rick has pointed to the Stanford commencement speech, I think. Okay. Now it decays. So the other thing is you have to continuously refresh it, otherwise you'll forget it, right? So there is a half-life for that. And it's active. So stuff in here dredges up hormone, hijacks the breath, is responsible for the emotions. If something is not here, you don't get excited by it. As simple as that. Then there is a long-term memory. It's pretty much near infinite, like any amount, almost all amount, but it's approximate, right? So that's the catch with it. It's passive here, right? So if you have something, say an episode of someone yelling you stored in your long-term memory, but hasn't come to your short-term memory, your body has no reaction. That's what passive means. So you can store a lot of information here without necessarily reacting to it. And there are multiple times, right? So there's informational, episodic, motor, language, spatial. Spatial is essentially where you remember maps and directions, right? Problem solving. Important thing here is the episodic memory, which is enables us to do time travel. So not only recall past events, but also simulate future events, right? So this is also a specialty of the human brain. Again, you guys can go to this article, but okay. So now this is essentially the memory system, right? So there are a couple of things to be noted here: limited, decay, and active. And this one is passive but near infinite, right? So just note these two things. So meditation loop, right? So what's the outcome, right? So outcome is you are training the mind to remember whatever the object of your meditation is. You're just training the mind to keep one object in mind, one, and essentially preemptively leave out anything else that might come and displace this, because 7 plus minus 7 is the capacity of the RAM, your RAM. Which means that if you are able to store the definition of skillful and unskillful in your long-term memory, which is near infinite, you can pretty much, as soon as something comes up in your short-term memory, you can classify it and drop the unskillful ones. So that's essentially the idea, right? And you can take steps to prevent further ones from arising. Maybe you can just relax your breath, right? So, and you can influence your nervous system not to dredge up some of those exciting stuff. And the vice versa of that is you can remember to bring up skillful stuff, right? So for example, you can steady your breath. You can deliberately steady your breath. Then it can have a reverse impact on the mind, steadies the mind, right? So you won't pull up random things, which means that the mind becomes skilled at employing the episodic memory and episodic simulator. So episodic memory and episodic simulator is also what is responsible for your panic attack, but it's also the one that is responsible for, say, planning, right? The backlog planning. Or for example, you want to plan for your kid to go to school, right? So you employ an episodic simulator there. So episodic simulator is a tool, right? It's a very powerful tool, but what happens is that, we have more tools than we can use. So, and therefore, idle minds is the devil's workshop. So that's an example here. Mindfulness loads up your long-term memory with the information to aid the above, namely the definition of what is skillful, what can be done in this situation, what should be avoided, and things like that. So in essence, right, with that 4-part loop, what you're simply doing is training the attention and memory circuits in the brain. That's all you're doing, right? So eventually when you become very good at it, I'll come to it. What happens? What are the possibilities? So what is possible with this, right? So if you become really good at that 4-part loop, right? Like really, like this is 20,000 hours of practice, right? 20,000, and the guy I take instructions from, I go to for question. He's practiced for about 46 years, right? I mean, that's more than how old I am. And he's been doing it like pretty much on a full day basis, right? With increasing level of skill, right? So straight away, initially, you can get a sense of refreshment. After you get up, clear your mind a little bit, you can just feel refreshed. Often better than sleep, right? You also get reduced need for sleep with a little bit of practice. Less distracted. So no matter however boring your current task, right, is. So you tend to get, normally the way to handle boring tasks is to just start thinking of something else while doing that, right? So, we've all done that. Multitasking, right? It's a terrible idea. Multitasking is a terrible idea. It's basically anti-meditation loop. So you tend to get less distracted because that loop becomes second nature. It becomes your default. Increasing patience, obviously. So now you know, right, what happens when you yell at somebody or randomly, or even so, you just like let the other person yell at you or let the other person say what you have to do, and then eventually you can take a step, right? So increasing ability to delay gratification. So the marshmallow test is false, right? So this is categorically false. So marshmallow test can be trained. So you can be very bad at the marshmallow to start out with, and then you can actually train yourself to become really good at it. So they haven't done marshmallow tests on the meditators yet, right? So the results will be vastly different. Ability to keep interrupting thought worlds few times a minute. So this just becomes natural part of you, right? Just you interrupt, and then you see exactly what exactly were you thinking, and then if you decide that hey, that is a thought world useful, like you say you're planning for the next talk or planning to visit your nephew and teach him something, then you continue the thought world and strategize. If it is some random thought world, that fellow said this to me and this, and then I'm going to get back at him and blah blah, you just drop it, right? It's not serving any purpose. You get balanced view of situations. You read situations more accurately because you have stepped back on, right? You have the ability to step back, right? And what gives you the ability to step back? That 4-part loop, just that, right? And then you make the choices consistently, right? So it's the higher mind that is now responsible for making the choice as opposed to the lower mind. You can switch thought worlds at will. So if you see that some thought world is really not, so some perception of a person you're having, right? You know what? He looks like he's going to ding me down the line. You can quickly say that, what, that kind of perception is not helping. So why don't you just flip it to saying that, here are the good points of that person, and this is why I need that person, right? So you'll have a different reaction altogether, right? Many times you can think exactly what you want and drop what you don't want, right? So and finally, right, at the very high levels of skill, you can decide what you want to think just that, and shut down your working memory for the rest of the time, right? This doesn't mean go to sleep. This means you stay aware, but your working memory is pretty much empty, right? And then again, something else that is necessary to think, you think through that and just drop it at that, right? Now in intensive retreats, right, days 8, 9, and 10, you can start getting a glimpse of all of this, right? But often what happens is, right, I mean, if you guys have gone to the intensive retreats, anybody's been to intensive retreats here, like a 10-day or more? Okay, you guys should check it out, definitely, right? So what happens towards the 8th, 9th, and 10th, right? You start getting a glimpse of this, and things like good food, tasty food, right? Something that you are wanting so much, something that you are craving so much, like music, like in company of friends, incident chatter, talking for no reason, just to talk, right? Or things like sex or good food, music, right? They just start appearing like noise, right? Mind at that point becomes very stable. It becomes very sharp. So whatever you put your mind into, right, literally you just stay with it. You take the least path to getting the problem solved, and then you come out of it, right? It becomes very sharp, right? But then of course, once you come out of it, a day later it's gone, and then you realize that, hey, you know what, you need to get your rest of your life in order for that thing to persist more, simply because of the habits that you built up that's just eating into that, right? So it's just definitely a 10-day retreat is worth checking out. I think nearest is Poland. They have a Vipassana center there. It's definitely worth checking out, right? So this is essentially the set of things. This is just a brief summary of what is possible, right? But there are a lot of other magic that happens along the way. Yeah, it's probably Radek. I don't remember. Right. Okay. So 5 minutes demo. So anybody that thought that I'm going to meditate and they're going to watch me was obviously wrong. You guys are going to do it because you can't look into my mind and I can't look into your mind. Only you can look into your mind, right? So again, I highly encourage people to do it. It's not rocket science. Of course, it's optional. If you don't want to, don't do it. Not a problem. But it's really, I think it's worth a shot, right? Just take a look once, or maybe the second time if you guys haven't done it already, right? So the basics, right? Posture. Don't do this. Definitely don't do this. Just don't do this, right? If you sit like this for an hour, 1.5 hours, you'll essentially your fingers will go numb, right? Instead, sit relaxed wherever you are. You're sitting on a chair, that's fine. If you're standing, that's fine too, right? Just be relaxed, like least amount of tension to persist. That's whatever state that you are in, right? Preferably close your eyes because there's a huge amount of like I think the last I calculated it was like 0.33% of the entire brain is devoted to processing visual signals, right? There are like 4 lobes: V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, V6 processors in the brain that are just for the visual inputs, right? So all of them are very easy to get distracted. And just repeat this loop. This is all you need to do, right? Mind will start wandering, become aware of the mind, come back to the object of meditation. After a while, again, it will happen. Just that's it. Now, the important thing is this is a mini victory, right? So every time you do this, you're strengthening this circuit here, right? This is the habit you're strengthening. This one, don't worry about it because this is the nature of the mind and it will become much better with practice, right? So typically for a advanced practitioner, this loop is near instantaneous. It's always continuous, right? Okay, so 3-minute timer will start shortly. Um, Feel free to end it anytime before that, right? And then we can. Well, I'll remind. I'll give a short reminder in 1.5 minutes, and then I'll pull us out in 3 minutes. All right. So you can get started. I'm going to shut down my video. So yeah, the instructions are simple. Just bring your attention to the breath, to the sensation of the breath, wherever you feel it in the body, either the nose or your chest or your stomach, and stay with it. If the mind is taken off, don't worry about it. Just gently bring it back to your breath. Try to notice the sequence of events that are happening before your mind takes off. What exactly is going on? Why wouldn't the mind stay in one place? 15 more seconds and we can come out of it. Okay, welcome back. Anybody want to share anything? Did they figure it out? The sequence of step that happens before the mind takes off. All right, I'll move on. Feel free to interrupt me. So the deal is just that, right? The mind is wandering. You realize it. A higher part of the brain essentially fires an interrupt. You catch that interrupt. You deliberately put an effort to bring it back to the object of meditation, whichever that is. Like it could be one of the four, or it could be one of the many others. And then try to stay with it. And while you're staying with it, the key is to figure out like, what's going on. There are clear signals before the mind takes off. There are very clear signals, right? So you are deliberately taking your mind off that. That's the point you need to realize. Your mind is not going off automatically. So there is an intentional element behind it. Anyway, so in daily life, right, it becomes even more important. It becomes actually a lot of fun, right? So This is just the loop you need to repeat. That's it. So no matter what you're doing, right? You're walking, you can keep the steps in your mind and see what happens just before you forget the steps. So it basically means that you pulled in one too many things in your short-term working memory. Again, eating, you're chewing and you're swallowing, right? Those are the two activities. Like, when does the mind drop it? Doing dishes, that's another example. On the train, another example. You don't need to close your eyes. You'll probably appear like a weirdo, but you can keep your mind open. You can do it in pretty much any, right? The actual scriptures, uh, the original manual, right? Also say that when you are pooping, when you're peeing, they actually write that. They have explicitly written that. So it's actually all encompassing, right? If you're sufficiently trained, right, you can actually spot the point where you've just gone to sleep. Like for example, in breath or the out breath, and you can actually spot, you can remember the in breath or the out breath that you actually woke up, right? Regained your consciousness. So those are some of the funky things that are possible. But ideally, you want to turn this into a game, right? It's like, what is the sequence of events? And they are very clear. They're super clear. Events of precedes the mind, from taking off from the current task, right? So you will need practice. So you'll have to step back, right? So why do we need to become skilled at it, right? Well, why become skilled at it? So the whole idea is, right, the initial bonus of this is, the initial idea of this is, right, you make the mind quiet. From there, you can see how the mental processes really work. Namely, what is the sequence of events happening before you drag in one too many things into your random access memory, into your short-term working memory. Now, once that is done, right, this is where the actual meat of the thing is, right? So every emotion thought world is a life cycle, and we are essentially trying to hack into it, right? Let's get to how. Now, the more still the mind is, easier you can do the above in real time, right? So even during talking, you can know that you're actually talking, right? So talking is not an automatic. So you can actually know that while you're talking, you are talking. So therefore, just before you're about to say some nonsense, you can just step back. Working, emailing, chatting, etc., whatever. Right. So what's the life cycle of a emotion and thought world, right? So typically, and this is basically, I'm giving a cheat sheet of, you can observe this, right? There'll be a quick short blip in the mind, right? This will be very fast, right? It'll be like less than maybe milliseconds, like less than millisecond, right? Short, boom, something will come and it'll vanish immediately, right? And this will be some sort of perception or a feeling, right? Perception is like, oh yeah, he said that to me, just that, right? And it'll vanish. Then what will happen is, then nothing for a while. Your whatever mental activity currently will be going on, but your mind, there'll be some interest generated in the mind, right? Then what will happen is, the next time the blip returns, whatever that same blip, your mind will just jump onto it, right? The mind captures the blip, and now what happens is that you start talking. Oh, he said this, I was doing this, and then I did that, and so now you basically built a story around it, right? And depending on what kind of story it is, my mom said this to me, how could she, how dare she did this to me, and then you get either a very unpleasant feeling, or you might get a pleasant feeling, what, oh, he was such a nice guy, and so on and so forth. Then what happens is that this one churns up, especially if it's a negative emotion, right? Your hormones get churned up and your breath is hijacked, right? You start breathing in very weird ways, right? Your chest gets compressed and so on and so forth. It becomes a full-blown emotion at this point, right? Now, you may start forgetting the issue, or you may go back into this loop, right? And this loop can last for minutes, hours, days, years, right? So that's the trick of it, right? So every so often you can remind yourself, or if it's some sort of, say, a tragic event, right? Then you can go to this loop, and this is how essentially this is the result of this depression, right? For some tragic event, right? If you're not able to contain this, you get into depression, right? Or at some point you'll start forgetting the issue, right? That's the nature of the thing, right? Because your mind starts dropping stuff, because it'll have more stuff to process, so it'll take in one thing and it'll drop and then finally it'll change the talk, and that thing would have completely, that emotion would have completely vanished from your mind at that point of time. So it'll just go back into your long-term memory. So check this out, right? So next time you just close your eyes, or next time you're just looking back and saying that why you're not able to stick to your objective meditation, just see if you can match any of this. Now the key here is, right, you can hack into this. So you can nip into the bud here. So as soon as that blip comes, right, you can just say, hey, that's not necessary, I don't want to get into that, right? You can just terminate it right there. And this is much less work, because you can imagine, right? So here only the mind is involved, only very short-term flashy events are involved. But here, as soon as the body gets involved, right, it becomes very hard, right? Because you have to calm the body down, right? Or hack two is, you can induce this in the reverse way. So if you are raging against somebody, right, you can essentially start seeing there are counters like this. You can start seeing their good side, the set of things they've done for you or for somebody else, right? And then you can sort of reverse this flow. This is also equally effective, but this is way more work than this, because you have to fix your breath, you have to make sure the hormones are gone from your bloodstream and so on and so forth, right? So it takes a while, right? Hours. Now, this is the same as a thought world process, but with psychological impact, right? I think I'm running short of time. So it's a bit more complex than the above. Like, for example, the flash might come here and you might get busy with something else, and that flash might never come back for the next few days. So it's a bit more complex, but it's not linear, but more or less, this is how it works. Right. So like I said, right, you can detect the blip and wipe it out there. Right. So it'll never come back. So you never get into that state in the first place. Right. But this requires high degree of stillness. This is what the meditation loop enables you to do. Like you quickly get back, quickly get back. Right. Hack two is change the perception, change the self-talk, change the breathing. Right. These are all like this is the modern therapy in psychology. They suggest the same set of things. Right. You change the way you look at things, change the way you talk to yourself, and breathe deeply. Right. So that's what they say. But it's the same thing here, right? Accepting this predates modern psychology by about 2,500 years. This requires much more effort, but the end result is the same, right? So you get into a steady state, but it takes way more time. Damage might have been done by that, right? It's still better than doing nothing, right? Now, there are, for some of you might already start seeing some equivalence to the modern PC, but there'll be some other, we can go into some other talk. Now, what makes mindfulness possible, right? So I'll just speed through the remaining. So this is established research as of today. Repeatedly, they've studied this. If you attach an EEG, like the skull cap, right, with all the leads coming out of here, any decision made by the mind, right, say the decision to move your hand or decision to solve a problem or an abstract decision, right, to think of something, that can be detected by that brain waves at least a few seconds before your mind actually executes that movement of the hand, right? So this has been proven time and again. However, when they ask the study subjects, right, hey, when did you become aware of it? That's just a few milliseconds before they had executed the decision. So there is a gap in time where you know that you're about to do something, but you haven't done it yet. Right? This is just few milliseconds, right? So this again and again and again, right? So I've linked a bunch of research articles here. You guys can go read it. The deal is A is lost time for now. At some point in the future, I'm hoping that there'll be an instrument here that feeds it back directly into the practice. But B is what makes training the mind possible. So if you are able to step into this, right? If you're able to somehow inject flow into this, you know what's possible. Now you can train the mind to utilize B, recognize the decision, skillful decision, continue with it. If unskillful, here is the time you can override it completely, right? The same thing, right? I'm presenting the same view in 3 different ways. This is the total the modern psychology neuroscience. Now, multiple studies have shown this. This article summarizes nicely. Check it out. These articles, research articles, are all on the U.S. government research. I forget the name of that. So it's a repository of all the latest research. Just check it out. So how, right? Okay, we're almost done. So now the deal is, right? So as soon as you okay, say now you're all convinced, you know the neuroscience behind it, and you're like fairly confident things are going to work. But then when you decide to meditate, you find your mind has other ideas. So mind has a mind of its own, so to speak. Now the 5 broad classes of hindrances. Hindrances is in they hinder the loop, right? One is craving for pleasant object of the 5 senses. You're obsessing about the choco fudge. You can't think anything but the choco fudge. Or you have seen like a nutcase Avengers Endgame for 12th time, right? It's just crazy stuff, right? Second is ill will, anger, irritation, right? That fly is bothering me. Suddenly that's an occurrence, right? All of a sudden, when you sit down and meditate, is when all the flies decide to come and attack you. Or at least that's what you think. Or you can, this is the favorite, right? X did Y to me, so I will make them regret it. This is a very common pattern, right? It really doesn't help, right? Even if you regret it, it's not like it's going to help you in any manner. So whatever. Sloth and drowsiness. I'm so sleepy, I cannot meditate. Or today I'm just zapped out. Not really. So there are ways to deal with it. Restlessness and anxiety. Oh my God, what am I going to do with the review tomorrow, right? So 3 minutes back, that thing wasn't even in your mind, right? And all of a sudden, in 3 minutes, that is the most urgent problem that you need to solve, especially when you're sitting down and practicing. Right? This has happened to all of us, right? And then doubting yourself for the practice, like, hey, you know what? Mindfulness is not for me. Focusing on the breath is not for me, and stuff like that. This isn't me. I prefer doing whatever I prefer doing. So these are the broad classes of hindrances. So when you're essentially anything that is bothering, anything that is stopping you will be in one of these 5 classes. So I think I'm nearly done. Now they are all thought worlds. Essentially, they are the 5 classes of thought worlds that stop you from, um, that stop your meditation loop, right? They all pull the mind away. So either it's excess energy or it's very less energy, right? And less energy is like, if you guys have read the research, right? So humans in the olden days, right, they would run for a good half their energy to chase a prey when they were hunter gatherers, and they would kill the prey, but then they would need equal amount of energy to come back. At that point of time, they could train themselves to tap that reserve energy to make the journey back to their house, right? So there is a reservoir of energy that we can track into, right? That dullness we see is the plateau, which is an indication that hey, it's time to utilize the reserve energy. So dullness is very rarely the time when you're totally out of energy, right? So these are some of the things to be, and I'm happy to geek out on this, right? So there are a bunch of techniques, etc. Some of these I've seen work, some of this I'm still working on, and we can go on that, right? Go on over that. Now you cannot investigate the mind, workings of the mind, and when I mean workings of the mind, right? What is the sequence of steps? What signals are coming before your mind is about to take off, or get into an emotion, or get into a thought world, right? So you cannot investigate from either state. Like if it's too energetic or too dull, you can't do that. Now there's a systematic steps to tackle each. There are counters, right? And then there's the 3-step process. And if people are interested, I'm happy to stay back and geek out on it totally. So that's the hindrance. The typical 7 steps, right? I'll cover this quickly. We're almost out of time. I think 2 minutes. 7 steps are essentially, the first thing is mindfulness, right? So you want to keep the object in mind, and then the intention is to stay with the object, right? So this, if you don't have this, this is the precursor to everything. Second is you analysis of qualities, like you are able to divide your thoughts and thought worlds into skillful versus unskillful. Unskillful is anything that will agitate or take your mind to a dull state, and skillful is something that will retain you in the thing, right? So like, uh, you know, yeah, we'll get to that in details later. So something is in your mind, something pops up, you need to be able to quickly categorize it, right? And then finally persistence. So you want to be able to kill off the thought worlds immediately and encourage the skillful ones. So now you have a deliberate biasing of the mind towards stability, right? Towards stillness. Once you do this, right, it naturally follows that a mind with just skillful qualities, that is a mind that is encouraging only thoughts that are taking you towards still, will get a sense of refreshment, right? This is just after you've gotten up from sleep, right? The sense that you get, often you get a much deeper sense of refreshment right after these 3, right? This is a natural outcome. This is like a very logical thing, but you can also see it in, like, you just sit down for an hour, you can actually see this is working out. Finally, a refreshed mind is calm mind, right? So it doesn't need anything much. So, it's not chasing after stuff. It stops jumping around. When you are calm, right, you're able to focus at one. You're able to take a theme and evaluate that, right? A single theme. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean a single point, but it could be something like, uh, a topic, say a problem that you're solving, and just stay with it. Right? It's a theme, not a point. Right? That's the key thing. And then finally, when you're concentrated, right, equanimous. So the more concentrated you are, the less likely you're rattled by subsequent mental events. So then, you get deeper into the the concentrated state where you're able to kind of evaluate what that particular theme is, right? And specifically in the 7th case, it means going back and observing that same thing, right? What is the sequence of signals that you are missing that precedes your mind from taking off, right? This is like, you can sit for half an hour and you can just do it for your own, right? You don't need to do anything, right? Just go step by step and you can just see it happen. Now, key takeaways, right? Regular practice, 15 minutes a day goes a long way. Some of you might even get deep into it, because in my opinion, I think this is a natural progression for a software engineer, right? So what is harder than software? Well, your mind. So this is a natural progression in my opinion, right? Even 15 minutes a day shows you a lot of things, right? Now choose the desire, choose the want, choose the need that is worth your time, right? Hey, you know what? X said this to me. I'm going to make him regret it. Like, and this happens often at office, right? It's not necessary. You don't gain anything out of it. You're wasting time essentially. But choose something that is worth you're becoming, right? So a good one at work could be, you want to provide a safe and inclusive environment for everyone, right? Even if you dislike that person, right? This is a hard thing to do, but this is clearly a skillful thing to do, right? So anything that gets in the way of this, feel free to just drop it, right? Um, right. So you're not compelled to do anything, right? You can choose to do whatever you want. That's the whole deal here. Study how the mind works at the non-obvious level. Those signals are there, right? There is a clear set of signals you can see before the mind takes off. It's just clear as daylight, right? When you get into it. But this is not the brain we're talking about, right? So this entire science is at the level of experiential. It's It's what is available at the level of experience. Like the brain is not available to the like you don't experience the brain. You experience a thought, you experience a perception, but brain is some thinking going on, right? So I'm not talking about the neuroscience here. I'm talking about what is available at a level of your experience. This will lead to some profound knowledges, and for some of you might just it might just become your central key theme of your life, right? Give it a shot. Daily activities, walking, sitting. Again, the key is what sequence of events happens before your mind takes off. There's a lot to be learned here, lots to be learned here. Side effect of this is not even the goal, right? This happens as a side effect. You just hack into your emotions, hack into your thought worlds, right? See if you can nick things in the butt, right? See if different set of different instructions, right? Which is perception, self-talk, and breath, right? Can you have a completely different experience if you were to switch one or more of them, right? And finally, some references. Check this out. These are like some spectacular, truly spectacular stuff going on, right? Yeah, I think we're done. So we can stay back for some Q&A and some discussions and in general geeking out. If not, thanks for your time and thanks for your attention. And feel free to go have that pizza now.